We are up and running on a couple of different platforms here. So across the universe, as the Beatles sang about, we are communicating to you from Utah and from the bottom of Lake Michigan. And it is a magical second day of summer. We've survived the solstice, which is that tilting of the angle of the sun. So now instead of white light, we are getting more of a yellowish tone to our sunlight. And that just shows you how variable this world is that we have created, where even the sunlight is subject to change. How about that, Devin? How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I've been paying attention to the solstice and the moon lately and everything, but this time it's been all about baby and and everything. I completely spaced it. I'm like, wow, oh yeah, it's past. The summer came and it's here. Here it is. It's definitely warm, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're going to have a hot and sweaty summer, and it gives us all these hot and sweaty bodies to distract ourselves with. And, that can be both a good thing and a bad thing. Depends on how much guilt you want to load up on, or if you're just going to go out there and embrace life and have a guiltless existence.
Yeah, it reminds me of that movie, or in the movie The Matrix, where they're all jumping around, having a rave in the cave.
Yes, The Matrix is a good analogy for life in this material realm. And I happened to pull up something here that was written in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The first publication was in 1905. A little lady by the name of Mary Baker Eddy wrote Christian Science. And it's interesting, once you pick up a copy of her book, Science and Health with a Key to the Scripture, how much you will discover that she had intuitively, on her own, been able to glean as far as all the truth that we find in A Course in Miracles. And it's this one little paragraph here I think is pretty good. So give a listen here. It says, which institutes life, mind or matter? Does life begin with mind or with matter? Is life sustained by matter or by spirit? Certainly not both, since flesh wars against spirit, and the corporeal senses can take no cognizance of spirit. The mythologic story of material life at no point resembles the scientifically Christian record of man as created by mind in the image and likeness of God, and having dominion over all the earth. Did God at first create one man, unaided, that is Adam, but afterwards require the union of the two sexes in order to create the rest of the human family? No, God makes and governs all. That's kind of a profound statement when you consider that, number one, this was written by a woman in an era when men were trying to be the dominant part of our species, and it was written and put into print before we had even entered into World War I. So anyway, I thought I would share that with you, Devin, and give us something to ponder, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard that. I've heard of her and heard many people talk about it and relating it with the Course in Miracles, and several people of the time, definitely before their time, and making way for this seventh seal of our existence, where most of the majority of us, being so intellectual, are starting to breach the capacities of what the world has to offer, and that the laws of physics are no longer being able to actually confine us. any longer, and it really is just starting to be expansive. I truly
Yes,
do.
and you have a little corporeal being there close by. I can hear in the background, which is kind of a little bit of frustration. It sounds like in his voice.
He likes to lately. He likes to try and get Dad's attention real quick. Keep this going over here.
Yeah, he's actually sounding, very, very much like he's demanding attention, and that's not always a bad thing. But to go on with this, in Genesis 9, because Mary Baker Eddy was basing her initial thoughts on the book of Genesis and the first chapter, and actually the third chapter is what I want to read from here. It says Genesis 3, 9, and 10. And the Lord God Jehovah called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And Adam said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And that is a summation of our materialistic vision of God. We are always afraid of actually being confronted by God, of having to address God's presence in front of us. And so again, the parallels with A Course in Miracles and Mary Baker Eddy's teachings is very interesting here. And this is, again, getting back to that core idea within A Course, that fear and guilt and shame are the key tenets of our mortal experience here. I love this line, I was afraid because I was naked. Well, from God's perspective, who the hell told you that you were naked? Because God would not have mentioned that. And, if your girlfriend there in the garden is worried about that, she must be listening to a source apart from God. So that brings up the snake of mortal thought.
Yeah, mortal thought. I like that. It's the gateway to knowledge, good and evil.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, as much as you were naked, and as much as we were naked, we weren't even physical yet. We were these non-corporeal beings, using the term, and we were just souls until we had that knowledge of separation. Did we recognize not just that we were naked, but that we were even bodies, and that we existed in physical form now? And it started this transitional period of going into the idea of the life that we are has an opposite as well, and that being of death.
Yes, and of course, death is something that we laugh about if we are awake, but we are in terror of if we are asleep, because that ego, the whole idea of oblivion to the ego is anathema. The ego is freaked out with the idea that the ego will cease to exist, and yet it wants to kill us because it believes that it will exist beyond us. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it is a product of the body. Like, it came after the fact of the idea of knowledge of good and evil and the representation of seeing bodies. Like, this ego thing only knows itself by looking at its physical world, its physical life, what the body has been through, what the body has learned, what the body has done, instead of the remembering and recognition on the other side of that split, that remembers creating and remembers thinking and remembers developing the entirety of the universe and remembers the exact situation of what occurred in the Garden of Eden. And that, when God walked away and took a rib to make Eve, that he became Eve. He's as much of the situation as anything else. And it was that snake, it was that experience. as much as any of it, but it's this idea that we're actually referencing to the Son of God. The actual essence of God is incomprehensible, but to represent our relationship with God, we developed all these theories and ideas of what God would be in my experience. And so we naturally, through our love for God, started developing other people and other things and communication with, and we had it all popping up here and there, just instant creation. It's pretty miraculous.
Yes, and true creation is such an astonishing concept as opposed to this creation of multiple objects and all these individualized items, because true creation is totality. God created itself, and you can't attain any higher level of creativity than to bring forth that which is perfect and infinite in all ways. And of course, that is us. And yet we still wanted to run away and play in the garden. But that's all right, because in this final little blip I'll read here, it says, the Son of the Virgin Mother unfolded the remedy for Adam. So we're getting back to, that beginning of Jesus, or error. And the Apostle Paul explains this warfare between the idea of divine power, which is, the Eve and her opposition to the snake, which Jesus presented, and mythological material intelligence called energy, and opposed to spirit. So we've got energy that comes up in this discussion about how it is the foundation of our mortal experience. And energy is mutable. Energy can be transformed. Energy is dualistic. So when you hear somebody say, "Oh, God is energy," just kind of smile and wink. Don't confront them about it, unless they want to actually talk to you about it. But that's a kind of a chuckle, really, because if God were energy, we would be frickin' doomed. Because energy is both good and bad, and that means that God would have those two characteristics associated with it.
Yeah, it's a good stepping stone to the knowledge and the experience of truth, but it is definitely a stepping stone, a gateway, a bridge to the actual reality. And that's what the Holy Spiritual Universe is for and intended for. It's holding on to the truth. But even as we talk about dimensions of experience, every dimension is a form of a dream within a dream within a dream, and they all have their layers within it. And from the beginning of time, that walking in the garden with God was still in the awareness of God and there being God. And as we're mostly dominantly focused on the third and fourth dimension, we're not even, we're already threefold from the actual recognition of God. And so it seems as if it's not natural and easy to recognize God there. So we look to what we find around us, and so even as we're looking as physical form, it's that stepping stone of recognizing that physical form is energy and that it's all developed from energy, but we rarely continue to go through there. And those who are brave enough to continue to follow through what is creating energy and what's before energy, and that whole experience opens up the doorway that where we came from before we were corporeal beings or even non-corporeal beings, and having this actual existence that is everywhere all the time and has no shape or form and no placement or real images yet at all.
Right. It is a convoluted journey nonetheless, and the big thing is to not get caught up in believing that it is real, because because everything that is real is eternal, and that's the principle that we're really putting a lot of our attention on.
Yeah.
So, how are things going there with Super Dad having a couple of pups in the living room running around? One of them is still demanding mother's milk. Is he still getting a pretty good intake of mother's milk? The little
one is, and the bigger one, Atreyu, has been off it for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's still, yeah, mostly that. Yeah, and it's a whole new experience for me. I mean, doing it one wasn't so bad, but doing two is a whole nother story. But it's enjoyable. I really I've desired it. I've wanted it my whole life, and it is the last temptation of this Christ, and it's a whole new lesson and transformation and polishing that I thought I knew what people referred to as patience before. Oh no.
Yeah, that's actually kind of fun though, because what it's doing is it's helping you to recognize that you actually were created in your Father's image and likeness, and so you were able to extend that element into this material world. So, what are the big epiphanies that you have experienced so far in this journey of being a stay-home dad and being in charge of the activities of these two little guys, because they're obviously going to turn out to be your greatest teachers in life. So what is it that they have brought into the forefront of your thinking, and that you've had to stop and look at?
Well, I'm unique. I know I want to relate with people, but I've already been on this huge journey of seeking spirituality, seeking realization, previous to this. Most people do it after the whole having children thing and having a life. So it's a little different as far as epiphanies. I don't know if I actually have any, but it's more of a how to express, kind of a form of expression. So while I'm working with them, it's more of a choosing appropriately what seems to work and have a specific reaction with them. And often I have these, little glimmers of when I'm, they're both crying and they're getting really upset, wanting something, and nothing's working. And then, I recognize the big joke of the whole situation, and that it just kind of starts shining through. And I start acknowledging that God is here, and I'm still walking in the garden with God, and that this whole, as many different forms as there can be, that I start recognizing him being there, him being a child, it being the child, and these children, and even me. And we start joining in a different situation, and then everything starts relaxing and not so much getting overwhelmed anymore. So it becomes this, remembering that, it is in that likeness, and it is in that relationship that we have with God that all things are possible. And it naturally brings this essence of peace, just this having this simple recognition that, there's nothing to worry about, that we have this all set, that is just, and you think you know what the baby wants, or you think you have no idea, and then it kind of becomes clear because you start focusing on what matters. It's definitely, as far as epiphanies, it's kind of like that, and it's more of the fact that actually putting it into practice, being very challenged in the practice. And when they're running two different directions, or I'm going one way and Atreyu is going another, I feel like I've never run around so much in my entire life. Going out to the park or in the public is definitely a job. as far as on the body.
It's kind of fun,
Definitely fun.
We're getting back here. Do you have a?
I didn't change anything. I don't know what's going on.
Well, that's interesting because now it's stopped and it's not. Another bubble in the universe. But anyway, I was going to say, I think that, from the experience I've had, when you are dealing with a newborn, there is this astonishing sense of purity when you are in contact with the child. And I think that in order for us to have our religious teachers and leaders and our political leaders get a real firm grasp on reality, I think that they should be forced to spend a month each year with a newborn and just look at that life, the purity of life that comes through before the child is really starting to develop a sense of self, because it's very humbling and it's very illuminating. And if you have even the tiniest inclination toward a spiritual vision, it will open you up. It is a humbling experience, and it will open you up to find something deeper within yourself that you forgot about.
Yeah, it is definitely humbling. Yeah, you want to thrash out and everything, and you think you almost have this like idea that they're doing it on purpose. It's like, come on, why are you doing this to me? And it takes someone of that recognition. You're like, hold on a minute, I gotta relax here. I gotta recognize that they don't know anything. They really are here completely empty, and you really have this opportunity of showing them how humans can be, and the real recognition of love and of truth that they're going to take with them as their foundation for the rest of their lives. And is it something that they're going to be able to look back on, consciously or not, and actually be able to use it to dwindle, or is that, I don't know, to point to the truth a little bit? And is it going to help them and guide them to the truth? As much as I've recognized that through Atreyu, he is on this course of limitation, learning about limitation and how it works. And I've done that. I'm now on this course in limitlessness and trying to get out and this trying to be miraculous. And so as much as they're learning about the body, how to work with the body, how to use the body, how to talk with it, and how to pick up little things, and it's pretty miraculous to see that it's even possible, and that they have this desire to do so, and that I had this tremendous desire to do so. And then it reaches this threshold, and like, oh, I can get out of this. There's more, and it exceeds, as far as even A Course in Miracles has brought me the truth of this, exceeding that. My grasp on reality is more than being a body.
Yes, and so that is one of the beautiful things of our life experience here in this mortal realm. And really, on so many levels, we pursue things, and things turn out to be different than what we thought they were going to be. And of course, that can be true in parenting too, if you're not willing to actually open your heart up and be a parent. But with all of the other things that are going on in this world that we get all revved up about, very few of them are things that give us a constant sense of reward. And so you're at ground zero in one of those options in life that is made it possible for you to have an extended run of joy in the physical realm.
It's true. I have 4 stepchildren as well. They're over here on the weekends usually, and it's actually a whole new experience as well, because they're ages 9 to 15, I want to say. So I actually got a dose of the older half as well. And it's a whole new experience, and they're starting to ask if they're allowed to call me dad and everything. Like, okay, I'll just allow this to happen, let this happen. It's definitely a whole new thing. I just got this a whole family thing poured on my head, and we're actually talking about fighting for custody now and everything. So it's like I just wanted to jump right in, didn't I?
Apparently, yeah, having 6 kids in a household is inspiration to start a lot of projects. You know, you can remodel the house, you can start a garden, but you've got all this manpower and all this energy waiting to be harnessed and channeled into various directions. So if you guys do end up getting custody of the other 4, wow, you're going to have a lot of projects going on in your world, or else you're going to be losing your mind, I would say.
It would involve a bigger place, that's for sure. Yeah. Who knows? I'm just letting Devin do what Devin does. He's a crazy man, that's for sure.
Yes. Well, you know, and that goes back to that thing that every once in a while we talk about the region that you're in there, where the Mormons finally found, you know, a place to settle in and secure themselves. And that was one of the things that kept the Mormons really evolving forward, was going into an open territory and having to, you know, be able to create a living, create a lifestyle out of a barren area. And you know, you've got all these great events that occurred there, especially the seagulls. If you're not familiar, I'm sure that Darren can share. Devin
I've heard a lot.
Yeah, can share that story of how the seagulls salvaged everybody's ass there in Salt Lake City at one point.
It started with the crickets. Crickets took over and are eating everything. But, and then they prayed for a miracle, and the seagulls came over and ate them all. And no one's done anything about praying for the seagulls. Get rid of them. It's kind of funny that it happened that way, that there actually weren't seagulls before Brigham Young, to their knowledge anyway. And yeah, you know, I wanted to say that, like, if I still had the practice of thinking too much, I don't know if I could do this. And referring to the Matrix again, I think the only way I can do this each day is I remember you got to let it all go, Neil. You got to fear, doubt, disbelief, free your mind. And it really is, you know, the capability of not necessarily choosing what it is that you're supposed to be doing, not worried about what to say or what to do or where to go, and just allowing it to happen and watching it happen, and pretty much being in prayer all the time without ceasing, in order to know what to do and what to say, and just allow it to happen. You know, it's funny because it seems as if some days I am, you know, supporting things, and some days I'm not. So I feel like I'm a little different, but it's as if it's some sort of polishing and some sort of movement with the children that is bringing about different experiences for them. And as much as I want to treat them all the same, as far as with the same words and the same actions, and thinking of it like that, really each and every one of them, it kind of comes out different, that I say things differently, and I treat them differently, as far as kind of what their, you know, needs are. And, you know, when I recognize another need, it just naturally comes out. And then I really don't need to worry about what to say and what to do. But it's at the same time, as I start thinking too much, I get concerned about, oh, well, maybe some of them will think I have special relationships about some of them and not. But it's more, I have this recognition that I want to treat them all the same. So I don't choose how to treat them, even though the outer form might seem as if it's different, but it's because my recognition of myself is beyond this personal self.
Yes, it's forcing you back to that state of surrender, because having having 6 kids in the house would definitely be a situation where there would be a lot of conflicting energies, or the appearance of that, and then that puts you in that position of going back over and over again and arriving at that realization that there is really only one problem and ultimately only one solution. So you can, turn around and put that into application with all of these different little bundles of joy zipping around you, and realize that the only problem that any of these children have is that they have imagined themselves being separate for just a millisecond. So that gives you multiple opportunities to reaffirm to them that no, you're not separate. You couldn't achieve that, in your highest expectations. That is a non-achievable goal. So just relax and know that you exist within God.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I do recognize them as aspects of my mind, and very close aspects, as if, I can almost recognize their position in my mind, like who's an idea of authority, and who's an idea of who has the say, and all this stuff. It's like they all have a different representation, and it's as if there's quite literally a manifestation of an individual set of thoughts, and that it's always, as I also see them change in the same right as my mind changes, and that we have this connection there. And I try and hint towards things and say things at the same time, as I don't see a complete reason to preach to them or anything. I definitely have this symbol, as I don't know if you know, but I carry a staff with me everywhere I go. And so they see a lot of it, and they think I'm about to leave it someplace. And so they have it in their mind as well. And they're like, hey, don't forget your stick. And I'm like, yeah, no, I won't. It's been 3 years now, every day with me. So it's a big part of me. And at first, I've had conversations about, especially one of them who inquired a lot about ACIM and spirituality. And so we had a lot of concepts talked about. And even though it was mostly specifically about getting into the 5th and 6th dimensions, at the same time, they naturally have this rebound effect, I guess, of coming back into the world, because their lessons currently are about the world, and really about learning how to master this body and this mind, into a sense. Really, it's not until they reach that threshold of experience that they want to inquire more. And I'll be here, I'll be ready to inspire them more. And if they really have questions about, what I believe or anything, and even if I'm past, I got a lot of all these programs online. I got questions answered about all my principles and beliefs and everything. So, I have that, seed planted, and I'm just watering it now. So
That's excellent. And in a situation like this, you do have another dad that's in this scenario, that's a part of the background here.
tell me about it. Oy.
So Well, I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts about that? But you offered them before I could even bring up the question. So, do
That's
you
a
see
new
where?
experience too, That's
Well,
having to deal with an ex of hers, and he's seems very manipulative, and it just has this whole experience about it. And I've never officially met him, but just see it on the peripheral. And it's so easy to get defensive, of my wife for one, and of the kids and how they're being treated or the lack of, and everything. And so that's, the whole thought of my mind, trying to accept it as it is, and then, wanting to protect these kids as well. That's one reason we want to fight for custody, because we feel like it's not reaching they're not getting the care they need and the time and attention they need. And so it's like it does experience this war about it. Definitely. And now it's just, as I really come to it, I start to just, as much as I have to let that be as it is, I have to let Devin be as it is. And so it includes this whole wanting to care for them and fight for custody as well. Even though I really have no real say in this at all. I'm the peripheral guy. And I'm the new image in this. And, I think about how the kids are being affected by this. They've been on his side. He got married, and the wife tried to knock Trina out of the relationship and tried to take custody without doing it legally and everything. And then she goes and leaves the whole relationship. So the kids are very confused and getting very confused. It's definitely changing their minds as far as society sees of relationships. And hopefully that is a seed in itself, trusting that, this is all lessons God would have us learn, and that it has the ability and capacity to teach us and teach them about, what a real relationship is about. And you think it's going to harm them, and we want to say, oh no, this isn't good, this is going to teach them bad ways about relationships, and they're never going to trust relationships and marriage ever again. And maybe that's kind of what's intended. And they're actually eventually, and with that trust, we'll see a better, something more than what society has to offer, the billions of the thousands of years that it's been doing the same thing. Perhaps there's something greater about relationships that can be learned through this situation.
Yeah,
And
I'm definitely on board with that idea. And of course, it all goes back to that one core essence, which is all about love, or the fear of the loss of love, or the feeling that God has stopped loving you. Because going back to that book of Genesis, after they encountered God in the garden, and they said, we were afraid, we were naked. We heard you coming, and we didn't want you to find us in our nakedness. And the God that is related to us there, which is Jehovah, and has absolutely nothing to do with the God of creation, Elohim, but Jehovah has a snit and a little bit of a meltdown and throws him out of the garden. So, the core of our existence as humans is based in that mythology, and it's a mythology that's repeated over and over in a lot of different religious themes and different religious traditions. But the rejection of God's child by God is something that we see played out in this material world over and over and over again. So the core of all of the adventures that you're going to be encountering here is to once again, over and over again, go back to that idea of God did not reject me. And, that's how our children are attuned to truth is to reinforce that idea over and over again. I am not rejecting you, and God did not reject you. So the foundation that you're going to have to lay here is one where it's very clear in the minds of these kids that that they did nothing that deserves your contempt or your neglect or your angst or your anger, and just to make them aware of the fact that they are loved in all circumstances, in every situation they encounter.
It is something that I try and attempt to say things to recognize that, as being an authority figure as well, you have to understand that this isn't something personal, or that it's not, all about you. And I want you in my life, and I enjoy your presence. And this is, and reinforcing the side that the voice in their heads about being accepted and love and all these ideas of goodness and sweetness. As much as I can say, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's for sure.
No, that's actually probably the most important recognition that you could have, because then that throws the burden of making decisions off of your shoulders and puts it into the realm of, I'm sure that God will give me everything I need to make this whole situation manageable, and that we will attain the highest and greatest good for everyone involved.
Yeah, moment by moment, that's all I'm worried about, is what is happening and occurring in this moment, and how can I be this greatest understanding and presence of love that I can comprehend and that I could see and feel, and and what can we do today? Let's get something to do. We got to get out of the house, that's for sure.
Well, and that gives you the opportunity to put tomatoes in the ground and start a cornfield, and look at lettuce and onions and potatoes. And so, do you guys have a little bit of a garden going there where you're able to consume some of your time nurturing the earth?
There is space in the back. We are actually in condos, and my parents live upstairs, and so we're kind of sharing that with them. But as much as my interest has not really been focused on gardening or anything, it just doesn't really come up in my mind. But it is definitely a good idea and something to do. Is it that time? I think it's too late to plant tomatoes.
No, not actually. I think you can probably get some good-sized plants that are still hanging around at Home Depot and places like that, stick them in the ground. It's not so much about watering them and giving them all these vitamins and minerals, but again, it's like anything that is growing around you. If you shower them with love, they will give you all the ingredients you need to make tomato sauce.
Yeah. Oh, love. And it's more about watering and nurturing and giving love to the children, and the attention they need, and that yearning for learning that I remember being very apparent in my mind, just wanting to learn everything I can, get my hands on everything, and just I wanted to be able to create and make and craft anything, and just on to the next. Yeah, and I could feel that coming up, recognizing that in their eyes and seeing, oh wow, they want to do so much. And it's a different story. They have the internet and the computers and video games, and so it's as they see, oh, this is good, and this is what they want, and it's easy to do. Somehow you got to get in there, like, you gotta either take them off of that, or somehow do it with them, or get engaged with them, and and help them grow, make right choices, I guess.
Yes, and That is a magical part of life. It definitely is the part of life that is the most rewarding and sustaining part that we can immerse ourselves in. So I didn't really have a plan of, looking that intimately into your world today, but it seemed like that was just the direction that spirit kind of
Yeah.
pushed me in. So, uh,
So you have kids yourself, or
well, I've got Eric and his wife Lynn, and then I've got the two grandsons, Jonathan and Kevin, and then we've got the great grandson Aiden, who is now 6 and thinks he is the master of all time and space. So he's quite a delight. He's at that point where he's really developing confidence, and I think that's kind of a tender age though, because kids who have too much confidence can take a step off the edge of the earth. So we can't blunt them, but at the same time, we have to cultivate a sense of self-direction and confidence. So, when your two little guys are in that 4 to 8 age range, that's going to be a big theme for you, is making sure that they are able to see, themselves as being fearless, but also having enough sense to know that you don't stick your hand in the lion's mouth if the lion is hasn't been fed for a while. So it's an interesting way of having to balance life out and all of the elements in life. And I tend to be just background noise for the family because I don't really, I guess you could say I don't really participate in the sense of being right at ground zero all the time. But I think by laying out this sense of human interaction, of harmony, and of love, and maintaining that as my vibe in the family environment, it seems like that has been very workable for me and has worked for the kids too.
you're kind of the overseer now? You've done your part. Now you just let them do theirs and see the ripple out. As like through time. You planted the seeds and now they're flourishing.
Yes, and to just affirm all the truth that I see in the environment, that every loving interaction, every opportunity for healing to occur, that's what I put my attention on and affirm. And I think that that's what the elders' true role in society is. It's not, sitting here spouting off wisdom. I think that the real role of the elder is to see the truth, affirm the truth, and hold the truth. And that the core of the truth is the idea of love. And so if you've got an elder around you that's using that as a primary ethic and then building on that with sharing of wisdom and life experience, I think that gives you a really solid grounding to be a part of the world with.
Yeah, I have. So we have the grandparents upstairs, and Trey, you get to spend a lot of time with them, and he has a good time being able to go up and down the stairs and get a whole different vibe going, whole different experience. And they're very into still the mainstream Mormon church, and so he has that whole identification available to him. And then you got me down here being the extremist that I am, and just doing whatever it is I'm doing. I don't even know what I'm doing. But it's all good. Giving them options to look at and to see, and it's just a beautiful experience. And as far as elders, my father has been in a wheelchair all of Atrehu's life. He's been working out, but he had a few strokes and quadruple bypass surgery and all sorts of things, and is diabetic and he's on kidney dialysis. I'm like, well, now you're not being a good influence. Having all these body issues. And he's hanging in there, and he's still around, but he definitely is. He's not so much concerned about telling us what to do or how to be anymore, and he's just this, always ready to smile when you look at him. Kind of an experience, which is nice.
That is good. He's adapting and adjusting, and but it's a foundation of that. He is committed to life. He's going through all of these different issues and surviving them, and I think that is a very important thing. And I think that's what we have to look at in the journey to healing for all of us, is to affirm that desire, not to just cling to the body, but to not pass out and fall into a deeper level of sleep and then wake up somewhere else and have to play all these stupid games over and over again. So it does give us a nice grounding, a nice foundation to work with when you can point that out about all of the people, not just the elders around you, but all of the people around you. You can see within them that they are in love with life, that they embrace life, that they hold on to life. And, you can see in others that rejection of life, and you just have to learn how to consistently forgive people who are on the negative side of that dynamic, and affirm what you're seeing with those around you as those who are torchbearers for existence, for evolution, for transformation, and ultimately for the atonement, the complete integration once again with the Father.
Yeah, to still have a purpose in life and a passion is definitely important, as far as I see, like a reason to be living. It's somewhat of a sad thing when you see people just kind of dying away, and they lose a will for life or a wanting to be alive. And it is helpful with projects and with something to do and to put out there and to be an example of, and you have a reason and a purpose to life, not necessarily a goal, but just something that gives you passion each day and compassion each day for something, and loving something, and being that love each day. It seems like a reason to be alive is definitely necessary, I suppose.
Yeah, it's what sustains us. It's what keeps us engaged. And again, at some point we'll eventually have to even transcend that, because we do get obsessed with trying to keep the mortal side of the dream alive. And at some point, everything around us will eventually dissolve. But to go back to that core sense of, I am life, and life is eternal, and life is unstoppable, and life is, unassailable. But at the same time, life is always forgiving, accepting, and embracing every other expression of life around it.
It's like, what have you trained your mind to insist is true? Like, if you go through an experience of your physical body's death, if you're trained just to respond to a physical body, that entails reincarnation, because you need another physical body. But if you're trained to recognize this eternal aspect and this being alive, even if your body is apparently dead, then you're trained in this mindset to you still have a reason to exist. You still have a passion for living and a purpose, as we do give it all the meaning that it has for us. I believe that's what's made it possible for reincarnation to happen, and even just the fact that what Jesus is really attempting to teach us, that we can actually train our minds to recognize this truth about ourselves when there is nothing else to recognize. When there's, no, I'm already know that I'm not a body, and so what else am I? What else am I? And we can then identify with, oh, instead of the body is dead and I still want to itch my head, I'm going to need another body to itch my head. I have this training of itching my head and, doing things with the body. And, like, where do I exist if I don't have a body? So you look for another body, or you look for another physical experience, instead of choosing to recognize a truth of yourself still existing, still living, still being whatever it is, and can then embrace the spiritual universe as a representation, and even to recognize yourself as this supreme consciousness.
Yes, and I often am drawn to ponder how many people are around me that are not wearing bodies. That's something that I find humorous and engaging at the same time, because we do have a lot of people who are able to communicate with people who are on the other side, as if there were, different levels of existence. But in truth, we're always surrounded by a host, a heavenly host of people who are not wearing bodies. And perhaps that's a part of the journey also, to expand our sensitivity and to be able to see them and hear them more fluidly, more clearly. And perhaps that is another step in the process of pulling all of this stuff together so that the dream ultimately is ended.
Yeah, I would say anything to recognize your truth and the reality of who you are, and to recognize that consciousness, Christ's self, uh, many things, and communicating with others, spirits and beings, is definitely as a beautiful stepping stone as much as anything the Spirit has to offer. Even the guidance of the Holy Spirit eventually won't need to guide you anywhere when you recognize the truth and of actually where you are. And so when it seems like a journey was necessary, it was only to come back to where you are, and the truth about yourself. So it's definitely a beautiful thing. I remember practicing and enhancing my psychic skills, and starting to recognize the self-sabotage of it, and trying to make sure that I didn't know that I was connected to everybody. So I had to do, no, you name every other thought, what am I eating, every other option but the actual thing you're eating, just to make sure that you don't know that you're connected to the universe. It's funny.
It is funny and tragic, and something that we're all growing out of, thank God. So anyway, I've had the puppy who is participating in this from the exterior of the house. He has barked pretty much nonstop for our entire journey here. And so I think I'll go out and beat him into a pound of hamburger, as I like to say.
So you got your puppy over there, and I got my puppies.
Yes.
Well,
yes, and they are demanding, but I think I'll just go out and smack him upside with a pound of love, and make him realize that when he barks like that, he's thinking he's unloved, and we need to resolve that error of his thought, which is probably a part of my thoughts. So that's I'm sure, a discussion for another session. It was great chatting with you today, Devin.
yeah, thank you very much for this time.
And in 1 week we will reconvene, and we'll make sure that we get the latest update on whether or not Devin is going to plant a garden this year.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Let's see if it happens. I don't know. All right.
Well, thanks for the chat, and I'll see you in a week.
Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.